Yeah, so thank you guys so much for coming here. I know I do know most of you, but I'll give you guys a little bit of a background on who I am and kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing. And then I'll get into some of the key points. And really, my goal is that you can walk away with some real tangible things that you can utilize on a daily basis and an awareness around how you're, cultivating, how you're showing up and amplifying your influence, because I think that's really important. But I do it from a different perspective, and I'll tell you why. So I've had a 20-year career in corporate as a vice president in mostly in marketing, and I worked in three different verticals. I was in media, I was in gaming, I was in e-com. And I would say about 5 or 6 years ago, my career was very much like a hockey stick. I went, far really fast and just got to a place where I was really misaligned and not feeling like I was on the right path. And so I kind of gave myself a big time out and walked out of my life, walked out of my marriage, walked into a tiny little rental property I had and kind of started to rebuild. And so what I really got super passionate about was kind of understanding the intangibles, I guess you could say, of the human experience and what were what were the patterns that I was creating for myself and why were they were playing out. And I just got really interested in this. And so hundreds of thousands of dollars later, I'm not kidding you, and 5 years later, I now am doing something totally different than what I thought what I was doing before. But it's very resonant with me, and I'm super passionate about it. And I've created this framework called the Impact Framework, and it really takes everything I've learned and kind of condenses it into a palatable formula so that people don't have to go spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in 5 years, and you can just really take this transformational architect footprint for yourself and say, okay, because if I wish I would have had this when I was back, 5 years ago, I'm like, if somebody would have said, here's the footprint, don't go through everything you just went through, then I would have been really excited. And now I feel like it's my mission really to normalize a personal growth aspect in the workplace because how we show up, how we interact, it's all, our life is an inside job. And when you get really good at you, then everything else gets easier. And how you show up and how you influence and how you operate in the workplace and how people perceive you, totally that game starts to change. And so I really wanted to kind of take you through a different approach to this and in my hopes that you can look at this and say, okay, I can take some of these things and start applying it, in my own life. So the first thing I guess I want to ask you is when it comes to executive presence, like what do you think about, right? Like when you think about that, you're like, okay, what does that really mean to you when you think of the term executive presence? Like put it in the chat. I just want to hear from you. Like what does that, what comes to your mind? I'm going to try and make this as interactive as possible. So I have the chat open. I can read what you're writing. Yeah, leading by example and empathy, 100%. A lot of people say it's like polish, right? It's yeah, confidence, how you carry yourselves. And it's funny because the term executive presence actually was coined back in 2014 by a woman named Sylvia who wrote a book on it. And she really looked at it through the lens of, it's a gravitas, it's the it factor, and it's polish, it's how you dress, it's how you walk into a room. And I would challenge you just to take it a step further because I think all of those things are elements to it, but I think it's a byproduct of an inner alignment that you get to that allows you to have a strategic thinking, innovative thinking. And so here's the first thing I really want to start with, and that is your state of being. So we all operate off of two very different states of being. You have a primal state and you have a powerful state. And they come from the two aspects of the brain that you operate in. So we have the amygdala, which is like right in the center of our head. And that's really responsible for our reactions, for it controls our sympathetic nervous system. And if you think about it from this perspective, as a species, when we were created, right, we were created to have the idea that we could save ourselves if we were being chased by a bear, right? So when you get that fight or flight feeling and you're running and something scary is happening, your body actually shuts down. It sends all its energy to your heart and to your head so you can save yourself. Well, now, and that's utilizing the amygdala part of your brain. But now we're operating like that when we get a bad email, when we get a bill in the mail we weren't expecting, right? We're living off of this sympathetic nervous system in a primal state of being. And when you live from that perspective, you're not accessing the clarity and you're not accessing the homeostasis part of your brain, which is the prefrontal
Yeah,
cortex. And
but your
that state is
synthesis
actually
during.
considered the
So,
executive
sorry,
center
my
of
sister's
your
not
brain.
here.
Oh,
That's
Peter, I'm going to mute you. Um, so that's considered the executive center of your brain. So when I talk about executive presence, I'm actually talking about that. I'm talking about sitting in a place where you are, where you're more in a calm state, because when you can access that clarity and that innovation, then you have more real estate in your brain for the right things to come into your head. And let me give you a little bit of an example about that. So if you get up and you're feeling like you've got that tension and you're not feeling right and you open an email, you're going to respond and you're going to interpret that email from the lens of which you're feeling at that moment in time. So the first thing is to be aware, like what state am I in? So I would say write it down on your laptop. What state am I in? Because if you're in that fight or flight, do not work, do not respond to the email. Do not pick up the phone. Don't meet with that team member. Get yourself out of that state and into a place where you're like, okay, I don't have anything that's a resistance pulling on me. My energy is not being pulled by a trigger. I'm present. I'm in this moment and I can deal with what needs to happen. And that's when the innovation and the strategic thinking can actually flow. Does that make sense? Are you guys with me? Do you see how that ties into the way that you show up? So there's so many of these things that are so foundational and they're not taught that way per se, right? So it's like I'm not going to teach you how to run a one-on-one. You already know how to do that. I'm not going to teach you how to hit your KPIs. You already know how to do that. I'm just here to take out the barriers so you can get there faster and with more intention. That's really what I teach and that's really what I want for people. So state, remember those two things, your powerful state, your primal state. And all these things that I'm going to teach you today are going to they bleed in together, right? Because then what comes from after that is the behemoth of your belief system. So we all operate off of a paradigm, and a paradigm is just an externalized behavior based on a belief system that we have. And those belief systems are normally solidified by the time you're 10, 11, 12 years old, right? And they're just things that had happened in your life that have created a story you tell yourself. And if you look at the psychocybernetic loop, it goes like this. You have a belief about something, right? From that belief, you're going to generate a thought, right? From that thought pattern, you're going to have a feeling based on that thought because of that belief. And from that feeling, you're going to take action and you're going to get a result that's just congruent with the original belief system that you have. So we think like 60 to 80,000 different thoughts a day. It's a lot of thoughts, right? And 90% of those thoughts are the same ones every day. So when you see people that are cycling and they're in a situation, it's because you haven't been able to stop the cycle. And the only way to stop the cycle is to excavate what that belief system is. Because subconsciously, that belief system is producing those thoughts. And what happens when you get in those cycles, and if it's a thought, a belief system that doesn't serve you, is that your energy is now tied to that. And you go back to that, and you go back to that, and you go back to that, right? And then you see how those cycles happen. And you can't make, when you can't have a, when you don't change the way you believe about something, you can't have a different result. So it's like, okay, so now you know, okay, I'm feeling triggered or I'm feeling something's not right within me, which is just when you feel that trigger, it's just a feedback, right? Triggers are feedback and it's incongruent with who I truly am. So when you get to that belief system and you rewrite that narrative, then you have different thoughts. Then you can take different actions. And I can't tell you how imperative that is. And I'll give you an example of that. When I was 11 years old, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And I knew she had been in the hospital because she was there to be a better mom. That's what they told me. And so when I was in art class, Kristen came up to me and she was like, I'm really sorry that your mom's dying of cancer. And I was like, wait, what? I mean, I just had no idea. And when I went home, no one talked about it. Like, no one ever talked about it. So it's like, what was the story I told myself? And what did I start to believe about myself from that moment on? Well, my 20s and 30s and really my 40s were filled with these huge abandonment issues I had, right? Until I really got to the bottom of it. I had no idea it was from that moment, right? But when you get into it and you're like, oh my God, that was responsible for the way that the lens in which I approach different things in my life. And most of those would be personal things, not necessarily associated to work, but they all transfer over, right? There's always a translation and a relationship there in terms of how you operate at work as well. So anyway, I think and we all have those things because we're humans and we've been raised in and from a humanity perspective. So understanding like what the story you're telling yourself and then rewriting that narrative is a game changer because it starts to tell you start to tell yourself a different story. Those people that walk into the room that don't feel like they really belong there, or they feel like they're not, that they've got a lack of self-importance. It's all from a belief system that they tell themselves. And when you take that armor off and you get to be the most authentic version of you and you start to really get good with you, that's your magnetism, right? That's when you start to and you lean into the flow of who you truly are. And I don't mean lean into the flow of, doing what other people do. I mean doing what feels resonant to what you're really here for. Then you start to magnetize the things that are meant for you, and your life starts to get easier and things start to unfold for you, and your energetic conversation starts to be something totally different, and people feel that they perceive you differently because you're showing up differently. Does that make sense? Are you following me so far? So we've got state of being, and we have a belief system. And it's really trying to track down with both. Those are all like related to each other. And then I would say the third thing that you really want to make sure you really wrap up is understanding what your triggers are. And this I think is fascinating. And I've done, like I said, I've gone to so many of these different things and learned so many different ways to do this. And there's a specific method that I had a trigger I was working on that has been probably impacted 4 years of my life that I was able to really dissolve. And it's with this understanding. And there's a method to this that takes a little bit more time, but the understanding that we live in a universe of opposites, okay? So there's no up without a down, there's no left without a right, there's no hot without cold. It's just the universal language of what we live in. And most of the time when we have a trigger, right? And a trigger is there as a feedback mechanism. It's there because you're not perceiving the whole story. So there's a method that I take my clients through where you actually can uncover subconsciously you're asking yourself these questions to uncover so you can see both sides, because with the benefit there's a drawback in any situation. And what we're meant to do is approach those triggers. And right now when you keep cycling from them, right, that's considered a revolution. You go back and forth, trigger response, and it's until you can perceive it and pull it to a 0 point neutrality where you dissolve the charge that you have with the trigger and you collapse it, then you evolve, right? That's how you evolve. And then you take on the next trigger, you collapse it, you evolve. And what happens is you're taking the energy force within you that's focused on the resistance that you have, and you're depleting it so that you have more energy in your executive center for your innovative thinking and your strategic thinking. Does that make sense? Are you following me so far? So a lot of this is really about it's like I guess you could call it like personal growth work, but it's the most foundational thing we could do when we walk into an organization. I worked in one company for quite a few years that had promoted somebody pretty quickly to run a large part of that organization who was completely misaligned and caused so much toxic drama within the organization because she could not understand how to navigate her own insecurities. And, looking back, I'm like, I wonder, I think that was a lot of catalyst too for I watched that whole thing unfold, and it was very traumatizing for a lot of people involved, and probably a big catalyst too for what I'm doing now, because there's no need for it, right? Like it's not necessary. I think we were taught this wrong all along. We were taught that there's external things outside of us that are going to make us better. There's validation that we're looking out outside of us that's going to make us stronger. And it's not true. You have everything you need inside of you. You just got to peel back the layers and then write the story you want to tell yourself and flip the narrative on that so that you're standing in a place of conviction. Because when you have conviction about who you truly are, and that's how you lead confidently. That's where your innovation comes. And that's when you stand in front of a room, leaning on that authenticity. And that's how you amplify and influence. And it's a whole nother level. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions so far? I feel like I've just been chatting. No?
The only thing I was kind of confused about, and just to be really clear, I am in no way anywhere close to becoming an executive anytime soon, but maybe one day that would be amazing. But I was a little bit confused about the neutralizing that you were talking about. You said something about depleting something towards the end. So do you mind clarifying that a little bit more?
Absolutely, absolutely. And let me be clear, when I say executive, I'm not even talking about, it was coined executive presence from that author Suzanne back in 2014, and she referred to it, from a workplace perspective. But you're the executive of your life, right? You're the lead, you're in the driver's seat, and everything is a reflection of you. And so, I mean, I've coached moms before. It doesn't matter, right? It's your life, right? It's how you show up. And I think what you want to do, right, is you want to curate the best version of your life as possible. So you live the most fulfilled. So when I'm talking about 0 point neutrality, what I'm talking about is taking resistance and triggers and depleting them. Because when you have resistance in your life and when you have a trigger in your life, like maybe you have a situation with a relationship, right? And you're butting heads with this person and you can't seem to figure it out. What happens is your focus and your energy is tied to that. So you take that with you wherever you go. It's like, it's like a program running in your background. You sit at that meeting and it's still in the back of your mind, right? It's pulling at you. It's a distraction. And when you get to the place where you can appreciate your triggers, right? You get to 0 point neutrality because you've been able to actually look at them and deplete them because you're like, okay, the way I perceive this situation in my life is totally not the way that the situation it really is playing out. And this is it's a method that we do. But what you essentially can do is you start to see the benefits and you start to see the drawbacks from that. And when you can actually really see the differences between those and you're like, okay, I get how that was happening for me, and you can collapse that, right? So you collapse the resistance within you and you free up your energy to sit so that you're just utilizing the executive center of your brain, right? Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Personally, um, I'm just kind of wondering because you said, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to take up a lot of time here, but I would appreciate if you could provide a very good example. I mean, you mentioned, a kind of a vague example of having a conversation with somebody where they've triggered you and then you're taking that with you and you're walking into a room and you've got business to do and that's getting in the way. So could you provide a clear example and of processing the benefits and the drawbacks of that trigger so that way you can remain focused?
Yes. Okay. Let me give you an example. You're dealing with a situation and you're working with someone who has wronged you. Okay. I'm trying to give an example that's not going to be overly dramatic with this. Okay. You're working with somebody who's really, truly wronged you, right? And you are wrapped up in the result of what that person has done to you. Okay. So all you're seeing is the drawback. So how do you get yourself to see what the benefit was in that person hurting you? Now, this is the method, and this is actually deep Dr. John Demartini work, okay? But this is the method that I teach with my clients, where you go in and you work with your subconscious and you start to ask yourself these questions. And I'll give you some of this at a high level. You start to ask yourself questions like this. Where, in what way, the person that just wronged me with what they just did to me, where have I seen that in myself? So where have I seen that? Where have I done that to somebody else? And then what you do is you answer that question 20 times in your head. And you go, where, because if you spot it, you got it. Think about it from that perspective. When you see it in someone else, it's something that you have within yourself. So you answer that question, where have I seen this myself do the same exact thing to someone else? And then you ask yourself the question, what was the benefit? How did I benefit from what that person just did to me? You know, did it free up that, maybe I got uninvited to a really important meeting and blah, 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 right? But what did I do instead? Was there any benefit that came out of the fact that I didn't, that I wasn't part of that meeting? What did I do instead that was impactful? And you answer that question 20 times. And then you ask yourself the question, what was the drawback to that person doing what they did to me? Right? So you have a series of questions and this is getting deep into the methodology work that I do, but you have a series of questions that you ask yourself until you get to the place where you're like, okay, this, I'm seeing now what the drawback was, and I'm seeing what the benefit was. And if you can do this enough where you can do it on the fly, so I do this on the fly with myself now. And if I have a trigger about something, I'm like, okay, where have I've spotted it, I got it. Where have I done this in some other way? And how has this benefited me? And what, what the drawback, the benefit, how do I neutralize it so it's not a charge? You want to get rid of the charge that you have about something because a charge is sucking up that energy and it's creating resistance in you, and you want to free yourself from that. Because once you have the charge, you start utilizing your sympathetic nervous system and you're back in your amygdala. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it absolutely makes sense. That makes it's like therapy. It's like you're your own little therapist
It
for
is
me.
truly. I'm telling you, the work that I've done in the last couple of years has been more impactful than, and no offense to therapy at all. I think therapy is amazing, but it's changed the way, it's completely changed the way I think and the way I show up and how I feel about my life. And I think because I'm so resonant with that, I feel this, I feel a passion to teach it to other people. That's all I really want to do now. And it's what I spend my time doing. Like I don't even listen to music. Like I'm listening to podcasts, or I'm listening to research, or I'm booking a trip to go listen to someone speak. I mean, I just think it's so important because I've seen it change so many people. And I think that's been my thing, is like I just want to keep passing that on. So yeah, so hopefully you got some good takeaways from that. And I think what I really want to do is also unveil kind of the next step, and in the next program that I have rolling out. So do you guys have a little bit of time to hear about that? Because I'm super excited about this. So when I started this work, I sat in this 3-day online immersion, and this gentleman, Cortland, was facilitating the 3 days. And I was so blown away by him. Like he was so incredibly captivating and impactful. And I loved what he said. And he was clearly, I mean, when I say authentic, this guy was so, somebody's authentic when they're just so magnetic, right? Like he had clearly cleared a lot of his blocks and his beliefs, and he had conviction, and he was magnetic. I felt like he was in my living room. I'm like, oh my God, I want to meet this guy. I manifested meeting him. So, a little while later, I did get to meet him, and I've, got to develop a little bit of a friendship with him. And he's so supportive of my work. And this guy, he works with Coca-Cola, he works with GE. He's like, he's, I can't, I'm like, can you coach me personally? And because I believe in always having, a coach. My whole life, I've always had that. But he's like way off the charts expensive. I could never touch him. Even with the money I spent on myself, I could never touch him. Well, I talked to him and a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, hey, I'm going to create my own mini mastermind. I want to do a 3-day immersion, and I want it to be someplace that's just off the charts and, feels very resonant with me, and allowing people to come in and just learn, but have it in a space. And let me tell you, when I talk about going to immersions, I just came off a 7-day off the grid place where there was snow on the ground in New Mexico. I lived in a bunk room with 20 other people I didn't know. The heat didn't work. It looks like 1975 called and wanted their cabin back. I mean, I've done it all. Like I've done both sides. So I'm like, I'm taking the best of everything I've done and not doing that again. I mean, it was amazing, but I won't want to do that again. And putting it all together. And so he's agreed to collaborate with me. And so I am just beyond excited to be able to bring him on board and teach some of the things that I've learned. And he does it, he really focuses on the belief system, and in a way that is just very palatable, and he's super cute. So I love that guy. And then in addition to that, I also partnered with another mentor of mine, Jan, and he's incredible. He's big in the Hollywood space. So he works with a lot of actors on embodiment before they go on set and so forth. He also he is a 3-time world Tai Chi champion. He's the head of the US World Push Hands team. He's an award-winning filmmaker. He has a cinematic, crowdsourced movie that he's doing right now called Justice for Hire, and he's partnered with United Artists and a variety of other large organizations that he works with to execute on that. And so he is collaborating as well. So I'm really excited to show you guys this. So can I just show you kind of what this looks like? Because I think you might like it. All right, so I'm going to share my screen, and let me show you. Okay, so This is the Executive Presence Immersion, and it is going to be a 3-day mastermind in Monterey, California at the Sanctuary Beach Resort, which is this incredible location. And the reason I really wanted this was because it has different rooms. So like I wanted to have indoor, outdoor space. I didn't want to sit in a classroom. I didn't want to sit with that. It had to have everything I wanted. And it's got beautiful bed, like accommodations are incredible, but it's got incredible spaces to sit in. And there's a beautiful lawn we're going to do an open ceremonies at, and it's just going to be incredible. So what we're going to cover on this is we're going to walk through the impact framework in depth, so you'll get a really good understanding of what that total thing encompasses. We're going to do a recalibrated executive identity. You're going to get real-time feedback on your presence. You're going to get your signature presence statement. You're going to get your system mastery tools so you know how to operate and take yourself out of that primal state into that powerful state. We're going to do a purpose assessment, which is a 20-minute, I'm an approved facilitator for that. It's a 20-minute science-based assessment that actually pulls out all of your intrinsic motivations and gives you what your purpose and your fulfillment statement is. And then we take pieces of that and then we tie it to the work you do every day. So you have the bridge of how you feel fulfilled when you go to work every day, which I think is really important. Embodiment with Jan, belief systems with Cortland, and then luxury restoration moments and beach volleyball, which I'm really excited about. So the speaker lineup, well, there's me. You already know me. Here's Cortland. And this guy's been doing this work for over 25 years. He's just incredible. I'm so excited about him and so excited about this. I think you're going to learn so much just from conversations with him. He's incredible. And then I've got Jan here, who's our 3-time World Cup champion, and another incredible speaker who's been doing this work for a long time. So really elevating the opportunity to come in and just have like a transformation, a 3-day transformation. That's really what I want. And I wish I had this at my fingertips back. And I think that was my whole thing. I'm like, how do I give people everything I learned, but in a short amount of time? So it doesn't have to be, so excruciating in so many different ways. So this is kind of what it looks like. It's 3 nights at the hotel. I handle the accommodations at the sanctuary. We have our opening cocktail hour. And then we've got breakfast Monday, Tuesday, lunch Monday, Tuesday, dinner Monday, Tuesday, and then a farewell brunch on Wednesday. So hopefully not too much of a time suck for you. And, I kind of tried to sit down and kind of show you the what you walk away with and what the value is. So I guarantee that if you really show up fully open and engaged, you'll leave with 3 breakthroughs. One belief you're done carrying, a tool you'll use the moment you're back in the room, and one way of being that changes how people experience you. Because I think that really is transformational. And when you actually when you can feel that how tangible that is, and you start to see people perceive you differently, then you're going to just get so engaged in this work, and you're going to realize that, it's your life is just an inside job, and like get really good at you and everything else is going to fall into place. So when I looked at kind of the value on this, I've charged clients or corporations 7,500 to do my impact container per person. Um, Cortland's way over $10,000 every time he does anything. And what Jan charges is over 8,000. So you're getting a good value. I think I've got quite a bit of value in those 2.5 days. And here's your immersion cost. So $3,900. And deposit for $500 gets you onboarded with your purpose assessment. So I'll send you the assessment. I'll do that 60-minute walkthrough with you before you come. And then you have the remainder of half the deposit due May 15th, and then the remainder on July 15th. And then you show up and we're all there together. I'm going to create an online community so everyone can get to know each other before you arrive. But I'm doing this just with 15 spots right now because the hotel is a little bit of a boutique hotel, so I don't have access to a ton of different rooms, but they are holding 15 spots for me. So if you're interested and you feel like this work resonates with you, then would love to have you come on board. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put in the chat, or let me stop sharing for a second. And I'm just going to put my calendar link in there. So if you want to schedule some time in the next 2 days and just, if you have questions or you want to know more about it, I'm happy to hop on with you and kind of walk you through it. But yeah, I would, if it resonates with you, would love to have you guys on board. So